All right, where you're coming from. So us folks on the panel and Gustavo will type in the chat an example, but we're hoping to learn where you are, perhaps remotely, but not distant. So I'm Matt, I'm from Chicago, but not distant. Keeping on theme here with the book.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, they are rolling in, Gustavo, from every corner of the globe, it looks like. Wow, it's exciting. We've got folks from Germany, Mexico City, Arkansas, Chicago, Oman, Northern Ireland. We've got Sophia.
Hi, everybody. Yes, as you're joining, please check the chat for the prompt. I'm from Chicago and not distant.
I like the John from Perth, Australia, most isolated city in the world. I don't know, I'm not at all distant. Love the spirit. Emily from Toronto, Ontario, but not distant. Tiffany, welcome, Tiffany. Good to see you from this area, not distant. We have people from Ontario, Milan, Belgium. Awesome.
And Gustavo, you're a seasoned global traveler looking at these locations. Who's dialing in the middle of the night for them? What kind of time zones are you seeing here?
Everything. I mean, I'm not used to that, but and that's so magic about people like making the time to join us. So I think we have a huge crowd. Shall we get started, Matt?
Let's do it. So we're going to stay in the chat, I think, and I'm going to ask a question, and we'd love to see your perspective, and hopefully they roll in with the same frequency as your welcome here. Is when it comes to your work or job, what has improved thanks to the pandemic? So when it comes to work or job, what has improved because of the pandemic? Which is a great question, right, Gustavo? I think people often focus on the limitations and the constraints and what they miss, but you know, the stress and the sense of urgency has really caused some things to be amazing. Less commuting. Yes, that is a daily thing. Intentional connection, inclusion, work-life balance, unity, inclusiveness again. Less micromanagement. All right. It's interesting how the remote and distant dynamic might come into play when it comes to management and things like that. Networking, hour flexibility. More walking for the dogs. So I'm seeing that the dog's life has improved, perhaps during the pandemic.
And babies, sometimes. I see a lot of collaboration as well, no? Constant travel, flexibility, which is the topic that we're going to talk about today, about diet. Look at that. Is that for good or bad? Oh, bad. Time to reflect. Lots of interesting answers. Thank you, folks, for chiming in.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Yeah, and if you haven't added to it yet, or if you're just rolling in, again, the question is, when it comes to your work or job, what has improved thanks to the pandemic? What's gotten better? All right, and as folks are kind of adding their comments to the list there, I'm going to introduce a guy that many of you on the call, probably all of you know in some capacity, whether just from following his work or personally, Gustavo. So Gustavo Razzetti is the CEO and founder of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy that helps teams do the best work of their lives. Gustavo is also the creator of this amazing tool and thought leadership around it that many of you might know, called the Culture Design Canvas, which is a framework used by thousands of teams and organizations across the world to help map, assess, and design their culture. So this great culture design canvas. And Gustavo, whether it's remote or in person, is regularly speaks with leaders and teams, around the world in all kinds of industries and contexts about culture change, teamwork, and hybrid workplaces. His coaching and tools have helped countless executives and teams develop work environments where people collaborate to accelerate individual and collective performance. And as you know, and one of the reasons why we're here today, Gustavo is a prolific writer, and this is 4 books on culture change, countless kind of articles and thought perspectives being featured in places like the New York Times, Psychology Today, Forbes, BBC, and Fortune, among others. So that's Gustavo. Gustavo, I kick it over to you. Thanks for setting this up and writing this book. And yeah.
Thank you. I told you not to make me blush, but you couldn't avoid it. So here I am on the spot. People are watching. What the heck? So in the end, I want to start with my journey. I'm going to write a little bit about what happened with the book and share with you basically the experience that we went together along this journey. And then Matt is going to do a quick interview. We're going to invite you to post questions about the book, about remote work, about life, about Matt, myself. And then we have a couple of panelists, people that read the book before it was published. And basically they said, this is not going to work. And they push back and they're going to share how they helped me improve the final product. And we have some surprises for those who stay until the end. Okay, so hold on. I mentioned that this book was a journey. So once you get the final product, it's a book, you buy it, you don't, and that's it, it's just an object. But there are many things behind it, and I want to share some key highlights. First, how it started. No? So you saw the end product, how it finished, here's how it started. I read this post, and usually like there's something that triggers me to do something. No, I remember Anish, who's here in the crowd, that asked me to do something, and then I boom and jump and creating I don't know if it was a new article, a new product, but I'm always looking for triggers that basically spark something. In this case, it was Daniel Pink's post, which said, writing is often the process by which you realize that you don't understand what you're talking about. I could say that you don't have a clue, that you don't know what you're talking about. Well, and I say, well, I've been working for many years, kind of hybrid remotely. I've been helping, especially when the pandemic started, lots of teams to get acquainted, not only to how to do culture design remotely, but also how to facilitate, how to start using tools. I'm talking 2 years and more ago. And this was a trigger to say, hey, I'm helping people, but I think that I have a lot to know. There's a long way that I can keep learning. And I'm going to write a book so I can share my learnings, but also I can push my knowledge and challenges. So I started talking to people who was really uncomfortable pitching people, professionals from different countries, etc., to get some insights. And as part of that, I decided I'm going to involve people in the process. So these are some highlights. Probably many of you remember, I asked you to vote for the book title. I did 2 rounds. And as you can see, as I tell people when I do feedback workshops, feedback is an insight. So don't follow it, use it as fuel. And as you see, the number 2 most voted title is the one who won, not the number 1. Not because I didn't care about what people say, but I use feedback to consider. And that's always my advice to people. Don't just react to feedback, use it to consider if what you have in mind is the right way to go or not. The same happened with covers, and this is one of the final rounds. There were hundreds, I did 2 or 3. Amazing the response from people starting voting and giving feedback. And that's what I appreciate most about feedback, not just how many stars and what was the most voted or liked, but actually the comments, because that helps you reflect and the designer into what people see when they observe a book cover for the first time. I share many of my post-its. I'm very much into trying to structure my thoughts. The original ones before I actually came out with an were really chaotic. This is when the book was starting to have some shape, and I share with all of you like the different steps. The book has 5 steps, and what were the key sections that I planned for that. This is the, I don't know, number 3 or 4 version. I can tell you if you look at the book, it's not like this, because when I started writing and went through editing, then things all, of course, change. And that's a part about life. We plan one thing, we produce, and life happens in a different direction. This is the first printed manuscript. So I had previous manuscript, but this is the first one I decided to, okay, I'm going to put it on paper. I'm into that stage. And that's where the magic or the craziness started. Many reviews, before we actually went to the beta readers. And this is my first printed copy with the draft, of course, with the cover. And it's the same content that my fellow beta readers received, in raw form. It wasn't finished, and they were able to see. And this is how it ended. So basically, like a exhausting, very exciting, very happy journey. But today or last night actually was the first time I actually sleep well after many days, especially the last one, trying to make sure that everything fall into place. So this is kind of in short, the journey that I started. No? My question, basically my hypothesis for the book, more from a content standpoint, was what about hybrid? I started feeling that hybrid was going to be, I'm talking about many months ago, not now that people are talking about hybrid, like, oh, and when I started with this question, basically, the remote expert said hybrid is the worst of both worlds. Don't do it. Look into 2 years back or 3 years ago, and there are plenty of posts people say it's not going to work. And then companies, regular companies that usually work in person, saying hybrid's not going to work. So I say, well, let's see. And that's where the journey started. There are 2 key things that I learned from writing the book. I don't know if I captured in the book, but when people ask me, okay, what are the key takeaways? Is if you want to thrive in the hybrid space, there are 2 things that you need to have. And it's kind of a paradox, a very intense tension. You need to embrace flexibility, not just of where you work from, but schedule, having different models across the company rather than one size fits all. But also you need to be very disciplined. And this is the trickiest part. So when it comes to designing culture in a hybrid place, you need to put lots of practices. You be very mindful, and not only as a team member, but also as leaders. Many leaders lack intentionality when it comes to designing culture, designing for collaboration, for participation, for inclusion in a regular meeting. Imagine the challenges now that we have people joining from different places, different tools, with different constraints, different obstacles in the way. So as you may know, the book has 5 steps. Basically, it's like a roadmap. So this is not like a silver bullet. I'm not going to give you the solution to all your hybrid problems. Probably I'm going to help you identify more and drive you a little bit crazy. But the most important part is this is a roadmap with 5 steps that are going to help you go through how you need to rethink your culture in the new workplace. In each of the steps, you're going to get tips, you're going to get research, you're going to get examples from other companies. I added a recap at the end, so you can find the key topics. This is something that I wasn't very fond of, but many beta readers say, no, you need to have a recap. So, they won that battle, not others. Also, there's a your turn at the end of each step. Basically, I'm inviting you to do an activity. There are many short activities in each chapter section, but at the end, it's more of in-depth activity. For example, in this case, we set your culture. And at the end of each section, and also embedded into the section, there are many tools that you can download with a QR code. And I don't want to jinx it, but if you go to the end, the last page of the book, there's also a QR code with a surprise. So you have to scan it to see what's up for the readers. So basically, that's my journey. I want to thank you for being part of this. And I know Matt has some hard, tough questions that he prepared to put me on the spot and embarrass me a little bit. I'm ready for that. So let's do it, Matt.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think so. I just got the book, so it's like just came in. And I guess I have a question. But the subtitle is Design a Company Culture That Will Help You Thrive in a Hybrid Workplace. The fundamental question I have is, what does hybrid mean? And does it mean different things to different organizations? Is it a set ratio of in-person versus remote? Like, just if you can just introduce us to what that concept means, because there's so much new vocabulary in the culture space now because of how crazy things have been lately.
Yeah, that's we can spend hours talking about that. But one of the things I put in the book is like, first, each company needs to define with their team, what do they need by hybrid? So let's stop using words like they are the same for like collaboration or innovation. Well, it's not the same for each company, so they need to define what it means to them. Huge caveat, it has nothing to do with location. Yeah, that's just a tactic. It's not about working from this and that. That's one model, determining how many days at the office. That's not hybrid. That's a stupid way of keeping the office-centric approach and trying to dictate how people it has to do. Hybrid is embracing the best of both worlds. The in-person, I wouldn't say in office, because you can have in-person in a Starbucks or in any place that you choose for, like hotel room, whatever, like in a conference setting with your team when you get them together, or in a restaurant to celebrate something or kick off the team for a new project. So it's getting the best of the in-person and the best of the remote. It's about flexibility so people can design their own experiences. In the book I describe, I'm not going to get because it's a little bit dense, but 6 different models that companies can apply, and they can see the pros and cons and which are more flexible and which are not, and then take it from there.
Awesome. And I've got a couple of, I really want to focus on the process of writing it and everything like that. But I have one more question kind of about the book. So if we receive it, we're an audience member, we're reading it. I think it's amazing that you've got tips and your turn and tools. So itself is this kind of hybrid of narrative and exercises. How can people use this book? Do you have any kind of user advice for like, hey, I'm a leader in an organization, I get this. What kind of mindset might I have coming into it?
I have two answers to that. One is as a writer, the other one as a reader. As a writer, I design it so each chapter, so to speak, or step, it's a little bit independent. So you can jump if you need to focus, but I advise that you go through at least very quickly through the whole stuff because you need to understand the flow. There's a reason behind that. As a reader, because I tend to be very schizophrenic, so I jump into the sections I want to read. Unless it's a novel, I don't read books in order, especially business books. So you can take it advice. I just jump in the sections I want and zoom in and zoom out. That's the point. That's
great. And so your fourth book, right? I think this is your fourth book. So I'm curious, as a writer, what have you learned now that you're a very experienced writer? What have you learned, the goods and the bads from the first three books that you really applied coming into this experience?
I don't know. First of all, people say, hey, you're a writer. I don't consider myself a writer first because I don't like labels, because labels just define, put you in a box. No? So I like to write and I'm getting better at it, but I'm not yet good at it. I need to basically hone my skills. What I learned, the first of all those four books, it's a book that I basically wrote when I started, and it was a little bit more raw and more me in that sense, right? Because I was starting my consultancy, I wanted to put my thoughts together about change and connect it more personal with team and company aspects. This new book is a little bit more structured and a little bit less about me, less about helping other people. So it's more functional, more like a lot of tools, lots of helps, lots of things that people can apply. So I want to make sure that I didn't just talk about from a high level perspective about what hybrid or whatever the future of work is and predictions that always go wrong, but mostly to try to give people from team members to team leaders to senior executive tools that they can start acting upon. So what I learned is basically that you need to switch your writing to the audience and to the needs. So when I launched that book, it was more of I need to basically inspire. In this case, I want more to provide some clarity. I want people to help find their path. So those kind of the things I read through the path.
Great. And, we've got some of the, your early readers and part of your community here. We'll hear from them later, but tell us why you decided to involve other people in the design and the testing process in the way that you did. It was very collaborative and you definitely tapped into the community. Yeah, many reasons. A couple of years ago, I was invited to a review Undistractable from near Yale. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. and I found it interesting that he opened up the process. But on the other hand, I found it, because a couple of years ago, chaotic in the sense that there were too many people providing reviews, but also there weren't clear rules of engagement. So what I found out is, and I tell this, if you don't clarify what kind of feedback you need, then people are going to give you feedback all over the place, and then you're going to get more confused than in a better position. And in this case, I realized that most people were trying to tell him how to rewrite the book the way they would have written it. And I always say, people, I don't want to sound, if you want to, I told my beta readers very direct, and they're still here, I don't need you to tell me how you would write your book. If you want to write a book, go and do it. I want you to help improve my product, not to tell me how you would do it, because each writer is different. And that's, for me, one of the most important. So that's why I decided to include people. Also, I don't know if someone suggested, but at some point the idea came to mind, and I was about to discard it because everything that feels uncomfortable, we tend to say, no, it's not going to work. Because why? Because we are cowards, we're afraid. And I say, well, if that's what I'm feeling, then I need to do it. I need to embrace that fear and boom, jump. This is a very big question, Gustavo, because I know during the journey, like you said, you're someone that likes to write, but you're also consulting and speaking and interviewing folks. So I know your thoughts are evolving every day, right? But over the course of writing this book, how did your thinking about the workplace transform? Like, what are some things that really stuck out to you during this journey?
Yeah, I think that one thing that happened is the pandemic accelerated lots of things that were already in place happening, so both good and bad one. I think that people really suffered, and I know that people were suffering from before. I say that culture is like air that we breathe, and if you're breathing toxic air, you're gonna get sick, and sometimes even you can die. And I say, well, this is a great moment to start a conversation about what kind of air do we want to breathe at our companies. So people, the biggest issue I encounter is I know that because of my consulting work, but also it was more of a realization. Leaders don't trust people. The majority, people are going to get upset. No, that's not true. The majority of leaders don't trust their team. That's a huge issue that's been happening. Look what Elon Musk did a couple of years ago. No, I'm the boss. I'm doing this. F you. That's it. That's not, and people celebrating because that's the macho kind of leadership. That's bad. The other thing I realize is that the workplace had a one-size-fits-all solution for people. So if you have kids that you need to homeschool, if you have someone sick at home, if you have, you're like me, that you prefer to write at 2 a.m. rather than wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Well, the work is designed for a 9 to 5, which actually is 9 to 8, whatever but in the end, it's a template that everyone's expected to follow. And the realization is, rather than design the experience around the users, which are the people, the workers, employees, whatever, we design it around the product owner, and we need to change that.
Great, now I'll ask one final question, but just to foreshadow the next block, folks in the audience, start thinking about your questions for Gustavo, because he's going to field the Q&A here shortly. But finally, Gustavo, are there any kind of key obstacles and challenges that you see companies facing trying to succeed in the hybrid environment? And is there any key piece of advice for leaders that you've got? I know there's a book of advice, but if there's any kind of key obstacles and advice that come to mind, what would they be?
Yeah, it all depends your role. If you're a leader, you need to stop being the hero that's going to fix it all and know it all. You need to admit that you don't have the answers, admit that you know. So the role of the leader is a facilitator. You facilitate culture, so the environment helps the people grow. You facilitate conversations to understand, hey, let's pause. What was working before the pandemic? What started working? You asked the crowd, and people started to say, hey, the pandemic shifted for better. They changed the way we work. Well, let's integrate those learnings, the things that work in the past, the things that work when we have to adapt, and let's create a new conversation. So I think that's the point. It's not like the past is gone. It's not about, well, the pandemic was a transition. One thing I feel it's resistant is when leaders, going back to trust, they didn't have a choice. They had to trust people that they would adapt and work from home. And people did a marvelous job. Not only most business stayed afloat, but actually when it comes to productivity, collaboration, and actually innovation in many companies, it increased because of the pandemic. So the point is, now that we have a chance, because once again, people used to work in the office, then they were forced to work remotely. Now the key issue is now we have the flexibility. We can choose, we can design what the future is going to look like. And in that moment, that's where everyone say, no, let's go to what's comfortable versus saying, hey, we need to rethink the reality. And that's where more companies are failing. And also because they're putting 5 people, the big kahunas, together in a room, and they are deciding the fate of everyone without involving the employees. That's the most critical second piece of advice, is if you don't involve the people in the journey, you're going to screw up. Think about what happened to Google, what happened to Apple, what's happening with Tesla. So they're getting news because they are clueless about what people want. Yes, they can force, they have the power, they have the money, but do you want people to be at your company working because you force them or because they like their job?
Brilliant. Thanks, Gustavo. And some of the questions are rolling in. We do encourage you to use the Q&A button. It's at the bottom toolbar there, and we've got a few questions there. Gustavo, I hand the reins over to you. You're going to spend about 10, 12 minutes kind of fielding some questions from the crowd.
Yeah, I see that question, like if there's an audiobook option available. There's not. Of course, if they would, I wouldn't record it. I would find someone with a nice sort of voice and pronunciation to do it on my behalf, but I'm still struggling to find how to make an audiobook of a book that has a lot of tools and stuff. So if someone has an advice on how to fix that, I would definitely get into that. When getting insights from other people in the making of the book, did you notice any trends based either on global location or industry? This comes from Ivan Houston. By the way, good shout out. He was part of the interviews. Ivan insights are also in the book, because I always say my name is on the book, but there's a lot of people who made it what it is. I think that, yes, there are some changes based on location and industry. For example, many of the advice that we get online about remote come from tech companies. So basically, if we are software engineers, the way they work is completely different if you're a manufacturing plant. So we shouldn't copy paste the practices, and that's something that I explain on my book. Get inspiration from other people, but then copy paste, because industry definitely, Ivan, it makes a difference, and location as well. Though we found that there's lots of trends that applies independent of the region that you're working on. So I always get questions like, in Mexico, in Australia, in Chile, in India, we're very top down. Everyone gets the same problems, but they feel that they only happen to them because that's what they know. But when I do a lot of training with people across continents, and I get that many of the tensions that people experience and they feel they are local, they're actually not local. They're locally based, locally generated, but they're common to other people. They're not global because they manifest differently, but the themes are similar. A question here, inevitably the question comes up about fairness. If I work in a touch labor role, factory don't get to phone in. So companies are trying to create fairness and balance between what's possible and what is necessary. How can we coach our leaders to lean into possibilities, even if we can make available to all 100 employees? First of all, I think that yes, fairness is critical, and fairness is not giving everyone the same, but it's giving the similar experience, a fair experience. No, you don't need to treat everyone the same because people have different responsibilities. Some deserve better rewards, but it's important that the bar is the same that you apply to people. What I would say is, before taking into consideration, hey, these roles, like Citibank said, some roles are fully in office, some roles are going to be fully in remote, and some are going to be hybrid. Well, that's based on tradition. No, like for example, Citi says, hey, if you work in the branch, you have to work 100% of your time in the office. Why? Can I have a 1 day working from home? Can I come up with an idea in which I'm going to start serving my customers without being present? Instead of inviting for innovation, we are like, the same happens with the floor. So I think that don't assume that the roles, because of the traditional nature, should stay working like that. That's one thing. Then when it comes to leadership, I think that's important to make sure that you don't create like subcultures, not subcultures into identity, but like hierarchies within the company, and always find like, if some people get the benefits of working from home flexibility, what kind of flexibility are you going to provide to people in the floor, in the factory? No, so kind of upset. Maybe it's not the same. Maybe it's not location, but could be time. It could be some benefits. And also, how can you bring together the people that are working in different models? So even the companies that work 100% remotely, they always spend time to bring people together from time to time, to not to talk about work, to socialize, to build connections, to build relationships. Hopefully that's that. I'd be interested to hear more about practical tips about facilitating conversations and really behavior change around step 4, reinventing a collaboration. To be honest, I mean, I would love to, and we can continue conversation, but if we get into the nitty gritty, we're going to spend a lot of time going to stuff, and probably not everyone looking for those actionable tips. I have a lot of those on my book, and if you don't want to buy the book, check my blog, and if you don't, well, maybe we can connect if I can make the time, but I want to get into the tactical thing for matter of time. But definitely there are many ways to facilitate conversations. I think the most important is to level the playing field, make sure that you're not leaving anyone behind, make sure that you balance the people that are in the room, that people are joining remotely. In Microsoft in Europe, I learned this through the interviews, the people who facilitate hybrid meetings are outside of the room, so they're always remote, so they're more aware of the kind of experience. There's a link, but I will have to read the link later. Support the book with short video clips. I agree, making a practical book into audio. Some more like comments. Thank you. Healthcare, yes, I talk about a couple of companies in the healthcare industry and other regulated industries like financial. And once again, like in every part, it's important that we consider the context, the peculiarities of the industries, but don't use that as an excuse to, hey, my industry is very regulated or is very different, so I cannot do it, because that's the easy way out that comes from many things. What was the highest moment of the book journey? I don't know. I thought that was publishing it, but I think that I felt that first when I received my first, you saw the picture, my first a hardcover copy. I published other books. I mentioned before, it was the first time I published in a hardcover. I don't like, as a reader, I don't like hardcover books. As a writer, it felt like, oh, it felt more interesting, and also it allowed to put more content, to include more blurbs, which of course make me blush and, hey, look, my book is good because what people say. But most important was for me, like, giving people a room. So I have some very good names, like senior vice president from Slack, Tasha Urick, a huge author, New York Times bestseller. But then I have a person that I interviewed for Fannie Mae. Hopefully she's here, and she's brilliant. How she's leading her team, how she's changing her approach, everything they did to adopt, and she's working in a government-funded kind of type of organization. And her name is among those, and she was, oh my God. So that's part of my high. Polarity thinking can help manage and maximize the best of both worlds. I don't know what exactly you're talking about. I mean, what I want to avoid is when we're talking binary terms, I know we're talking about the same, that's not necessarily a good thing, because we tend to go to extremes rather than see how we can integrate. Now, for example, in the past, we wanted to build a wall between personal and our work, our job. And during the pandemic, we realized, hey, we have kids, we have issues, we have health issues, we have a family, we have dogs, we have pets, we have maybe my place doesn't have good internet. No? So rather than do that, I think that we need to integrate. No? So break down the walls between one form of work and the other, and see how they can work together. No? If I'm addressing inclusivity, yes, I talk a little bit about inclusivity. I talk about, for example, there's a couple of stories I heard from people, how they found that working remotely basically make them feel safer when they were working from home, because they didn't have to be in the office as much time, fewer microaggressions, or at least they weren't as visible. They felt more inclusive. They felt, because certain companies talking about facilitation, no? We talk about, someone asked about facilitation, starting like facilitating turn taking, being more mindful to make sure that everyone's voice was heard. Then that encouraged women, minorities, and many other people. Thank you. So Katya is in the crowd. Let's give her a round of applause. So she's blushing. Let's make her blush more. Thank you. So I'm not the only one here on the spot. And so, yeah, I talk about inclusivity. One thing that I always found, for example, people talk why the canvas that I design, and many canvas don't talk about diversity or inclusion. It's not like called out as an element of culture. And that's because I strongly think that those are the outcomes. So the outcomes, so if you build psychological safety, if you create a great culture of feedback, if you have clear behaviors that you reward and punish, all those things aligned are going to create a culture that's inclusive, a culture that is respectful, you know, regardless of who you are, where you're coming from, and your backgrounds. Managing a part-time culture, or if you're in a part-time job, so I don't know if it's exactly, that's the point. So the culture is a part-time, someone on board of a president of a small charity, the part-time engagement on board, same stuff. I think that, once again, you don't need to work 100% of the time to build culture. No, it's about making the time. I have lots of clients that care about culture, but then they cannot make 1 hour to meet with us to talk about the findings because they're busy. So the point is not how many times you work. If you're full-time, part-time, is, are you being intentional? And the first step to being intentional is make time. So create conversations to reflect what's working in the past 60, 90 days, 1 month, but also what are the things that we can improve. I don't know how we are with timing, Matt, because I want to make sure that the panelists can join the
Gustavo, I think
conversation.
we've got one more question from Cindy. So why don't you field that, and then we'll talk with Anish and Maren.
I cannot see it. Can you read it for me, please?
Did you find through your work that some people's lives did not change during the pandemic? So they were already working remote most of the time, no children or caregiving required, but perhaps how they interacted with others whose lives did change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that everyone's life somehow changed. I think that, yes, the people that were working remotely most of their time maybe felt on one hand more, oh, wow, now like welcome to the club. But also they struggle a lot for, at least in what I observe and learn from talking to people in my research. On one hand, they were like running at a faster speed, and then the laggers had to join the running team, and so they have to basically pace down to make sure that everyone kind of accommodates. It's good, we need to do that, never accommodate for the slower runner, always go for the middle, because you don't want also to basically frustrate people. Some people took it as a challenge and an opportunity to train people to share their knowledge. Other people felt like, hey, you know what, I spent years learning how to do it, so you better catch up. But also there were a lot of people that weren't ready mentally. So I can tell I work remotely. I did lots of remote work in my consulting in the past few years, even though the 85% was in person. But still, we were, with Sophia and other colleagues, were used to using Mural and Zoom and many other tools before the pandemic. And the key thing that we saw is that the resistance was mostly mentally. A lot of people, they don't say, I don't know technology. They got stuck and they resisted. They didn't even give it a try. And they say, I'm not good at this. And I say, well, you know what? First of all, you cannot be good at anything that you haven't tried before. And you're never going to get good at something just for doing it once or twice. So you have to go through it. We push them through that zone. But also, I think that's an excuse, because people were thinking this is going to go away. So I can do whatever. I'm going to adapt to survive. And I say, no, man, this is going to take at least 1 year, year and a half. And I was wrong. No, it took almost 2 years and I was still there. So, yeah. Also, I think that the people that were working remotely were able to express certain limitations that they had. They were working remotely well, but basically they have to take more pressure on them. Like, for example, they were always the ones who had to take meetings in weird hours and that kind of stuff. So now they were able to say, hey, let's share the jet lag and we can switch time zones and everyone's going to be fine. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Gustavo. All right, Anish and Maren. So you're beta readers invited by Gustavo to check things out early on in the process. So hopefully you can each answer this question. Just briefly, just maybe introduce yourself and the work that you do. And then how did it feel to read a book that hasn't been published yet? So Maren, maybe you can kick us off. What was your experience? And then we'll hear from Anish.
Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations, Gustavo. This is a huge accomplishment, and having been invited to be a beta reader has been a huge honor. So I thank you for that. My background is that I'm actually both a corporate survivor and a recovering academic. So from that perspective, I've been lucky in that I have read a lot of stuff that wasn't yet published. I've reviewed scientific research. I was also a reviewer on a fiction book, not a reviewer, but a beta reader on a fiction book back in the day. And that was not an incredible experience. So when I was first looking at this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do it again. Then I'm thinking, oh, I have a past experience. Do I really want to go back into this? But I really want to compliment you on the incredible clarity that you gave us as reviewers. And I know I sent you an email as soon as the instructions came out. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen clarity like this. It was exactly, this is what I would really appreciate. This I don't need, not guaranteed that I'm going to use anything you say. So I don't even know if you actually did use anything I said. But it should be no surprise that someone who works in culture and on how to make companies more inclusive and just more human and allow people to do their better work. Not surprising that you, Gustavo, extended that experience to us as beta readers. So thank you for that opportunity. It was fantastic to read something that the rest of the world was still waiting for.
Yeah, I'll build on that, Matt, if that's okay. Hi, Anish Hindocha from London, not distant. And like Maren, right? I was really honoured to be asked to become a beta reader, but unlike Maren, I've never done it before. So I think that's the kind of the part of your approach of being inclusive, Gustavo, is that you're not necessarily cherry picking beta readers simply because of their experience, and getting different perspectives is really a microcosm of building an inclusive culture, and you've done that with this even selection of beta readers. I've never ever beta read in my life, and it was an experience. And I have to say, part of my motivation with very busy workloads to make sure I did the best I could do was because you have put out, and I hope I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here, a lot into the world. A lot. I have benefited enormously from the tools and things you have done. So it's the least I could do to review this is now a published book, and I have it, which is great. Yeah. The beta review experience itself, just to touch into that, was almost so guided yet not prescriptive. Like, Maren, do you remember, like, there was a word count at the bottom, this chapter 7,500 words, and then I'm going back to the guidelines, remembering, okay, don't review the book as if you were the writer. And I'm like trying not to offend Gustavo with my comments, thinking, it's a bit messy here, and this is a little bit unstructured, and this narrative isn't flowing, and this chapter is not as balanced as the last one. And I'm thinking, okay, he wants feedback, he's gonna get it. So, and unsurprisingly, you took it brilliantly, and that's the point, right? We take feedback as a gift, so we didn't sugarcoat anything, trying to be constructive and building, and it was an experience, a really positive experience, just reviewing the book, and I'm so delighted to see it in print. Well done. I mean, really amazing, fantastic experience. Yeah.
So thanks both. And Andy, I was hoping you could share your experience as well. What was it like giving feedback on a book that hasn't been published yet? I think you're on mute, Andy.
Here we go. My experience has been a little different, and I love the fact that we have the reviewers and readers that we do and did. I've reviewed or read and edited 4 books prior to this one, and I kind of do this for a living. And I've also maintained a journal for about 47 years, so I've read about 500 books over the past 4 years. So I'm immersed in words. Words is what I do, and so my big concern, and Gustavo knows this, is like, am I overstepping? Am I? Yeah, I know you just want to sort of, I don't even know if you want a light touch or if you want me to go in there and just rip stuff out. So I sort of varied between those two poles, and hopefully didn't do too much damage in the process. But the other thing that I was always told as a reference librarian was, the perfect librarian is someone who knows nothing but can find anything. So I tried to like blank my slate and say, let me not impose anything that I already know or have learned or have access to, and just treat this as a new venture. And I hope I was able to do that, because I think that hopefully made the book even more potent than it was upon inception. So so thank you for all of that. I think it was a great process, and I also learned some tips for a book I hope to write myself someday. So I do appreciate that.
Thanks everyone. And it's interesting what you said, Andy. It actually colors the question I had in mind, which is the mindset that you have in reading the book is very different, perhaps, when you're reviewing, rather than like, what can I learn and apply to my day job? But that being said, so maybe like you said, Andy, it's from the process and for your next book, but for each one of you, what's one thing that you personally really took away from the experience, whether it's content or a tip or a way to do feedback, whatever it might be? Maren, maybe you can kick us off. What's one like aha moment thing that you took away from this?
You're really asking me to narrow all this down into one thing. That's a really tough one, and you're muted, but I assume you're...
Knowing that there are many, what's one that comes to mind?
Well, I think one of the things that I found super unique about this book, aside from obviously the content, which is really to me beyond brilliant and just shows such a profound insight into not just organizations but the people, but the format is just so cool because it is so practical. And I read a lot of academic text, but I've also read my fair share of business books, most recent ones behind me here, and it's just so practical and so accessible, and you can pick those, now it's your turn, and the highlights, and so what's the word I'm looking for, you can put it to work right away. You can get this book and go to work, and even if you haven't done any culture work, you can take this book and go to work tomorrow and make life better for everybody that you work with. Just so practical and applicable.
Shall I go next? Is that Maren? You took the one I wanted to say about it being practical and immediate, because it really is immediate. You can, I've shown people the culture design canvas, and it's like I can use this tomorrow, and it's been, don't need to say a great deal more than that. Remind me of the question again, Matt. I want to make sure I can give a bit more of a considered response.
So yeah, just a quick reflection of the many things you took away from the process and the content. What's one thing that really stands out, comes to mind?
From the beta reading process, I think there's something I'll go back to, and I can apply this to my work now, having learned from Gustavo. It's just half of the success is the preparation. I think more than half. The preparation, the consideration, the thought given to what, just the experience of, it wasn't, here's a manuscript, go, please review it, I'd be grateful. It was the preparation, the thought given behind it. It was efficient as well, in a way that I hadn't considered an experience like this before, and applying that to my work, I can certainly see that the preparation was absolutely vital to getting the outcome that he needed.
Awesome. And before I hand it to Sophia for the announcement and surprise, Andy, a quick reflection of something that stood out.
I think that the quick reflection would be, even though I'm sure we all bombarded Gustavo with all kinds of different links and content and suggestions and whatnot, somehow or other he found a way to elevate that to a level where people can actually process the most important, the key deliverables, and then do their research on their own if they choose to. So it didn't overwhelm. And I think that when people read the book, they're going to be surprised about how much impact it's going to have right away, because it doesn't take them down rabbit holes. It really sort of says, concentrate on this and you'll be just fine. You'll have 80-20.
Brilliant. Thank you all. Sophia, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. So the book is here. I don't know if you're aware or not. I'm sending you also the link. You can buy it in Amazon. There are also other vendors, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, BAM, Indian Bound, and for the first 100 people that will join and take a picture with the book with a proof of purchase, you can share your thoughts about the book on LinkedIn. You can share a photo of yourself with the book like this person is doing. Could be LinkedIn, it could be any social media, or tag Gustavo and send an email to hello@fearless.design. We're going to do a session. It's going to be kind of a coaching session about this. So please join us, be the first 100. And there's another surprise as well.
Yeah, this guy, it's called Steve, who also was interviewed the book and was one of the first two. So he's already part of the 100. He really made it.
Thank you. So we want to see, share your thoughts, please. And now, because we're all remote and not distant, we're gonna invite you to the challenge and also ask for your collaboration. Our challenge is to get to 77 reviews by 7/7. So by July 7th, we try to get to 77 reviews in Amazon. Hopefully we'll be in Amazon.com. We know that this is a broader community. It would be great if we can have all the reviews in the same place. We will really appreciate that. And this is kind of a first challenge to be remote and not distant. There is a link. As I said, I put the link in there. I can only get my book after July 3rd. Okay, so you're gonna have, there's a comment in the chat, you're gonna have like 4 days. to read it. So maybe you're a fast reader. So there's another thing in the chat in there. And this is a big surprise. We really want to honor that you're helping us and honor your presence here and honor that you're going to be reading the book. So Gustavo is going to send a personalized note and an autograph from him. If they're share with us, there's a form in the chat, share your information in there. It's kind of the old ways that guys like used to sign your books. We're going to do a different way to signing the book, and you're going to get a postcard from him. So the information, Patricia, the information is not there. If you can put it in there, please.
One caveat, Sophia, because we are recording this, and of course, many people can join, just to value, because I say like we're going to offer this only to the people that are here. So if you're watching the recording, I'm sorry, but you missed the bus, because when I record the people that made the time to be in person. No?
Yes, yes.
So it's an equal experience, because we offer it to everyone to participate, but then people choose who wants to be in person, who can make it, and that's how it's going to work.
Yes,
so
but the challenge, the challenge for the reviews is for everybody. So if you guys want to help us out, be there for us as we're being here for you. There are a bunch of comments in the, there's links from the Mexican Amazon. Thank you so much. And there's there's the link here for the form if you want to get the autograph. It's from Fearless Culture, so check it. It's in the chat box, not in the Q&A, in the chat box. Okay.
Yeah. The one that says surprise link is for you to leave your personal information. You don't need copy the link, or open it, and you can leave that. It's very short. You can do that later, no? Yeah. Steve, you can do that. Hopefully Patricia or Sophia taking care of your personal email, so we're going to send the link to that. Okay, perfect. Fantastic. So we have a couple of minutes. I want, first of all, before anyone leaves, to appreciate you being here. Either if you could make it in person, if you're watching the recording, I appreciate the support. I appreciate everyone who helped me and support me through my post and sharing the experience across the board. And I'm really, really grateful. We have a couple of minutes that we planned purposefully. If there are more questions or more comments, or maybe the beta readers want to continue talking or sharing stuff, so I can take a break, that's also okay. So now it's your chance, whatever you want to do with this time. You want to ask questions to the beta readers, you want to ask questions to me or to Matt, feel free to do so.
Gustavo, as folks are putting more questions in, there was one question that was added that we didn't get to in the first round, and that was also from Ivan. So was your book sparked by the pandemic or accelerated by it? And how long culturally do you think it needed for the pandemic / lockdowns to last to ensure a longer term impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was a derail, I would say. So I always talk about reading the context so you can adapt. You start a journey and then you course correct based on the wind, the storms, the unexpected climate factors. And in my case, I was writing a book about culture, and then I say, well, it's like but there's so much things going on that so I focus more into, I zoom in a little bit more into the hybrid thing. But I think that once again, hybrid is not just a functional thing, which like people are seeing. I think it's like really going to transform, and we are just getting started. It's going to really transform how we work, how we collaborate, how we build and take care of culture. So yeah, I started with a direction, but I had to course correct, as Ivan said, based on the pandemic. So I didn't start it from scratch because of the pandemic, but the pandemic, hey, there's a bigger thing behind this. This is not just a temporary, it's not an opportunistic, let's write up. There are many books that were published early in the pandemic that were like a giving truth. I'm not saying mine is so good, but I'm saying I say we need to step back and look back into deeper issues, not just tactical survival guides for this the short-term storm, so to speak.
I think that's all we've got for the questions as far as I can see, Gustavo. So last call for folks, if you've got any questions, and of course, people on the panel, if you have any questions for Gustavo, now would be the time.
There's another question here from Cindy. And I think it's a fantastic question because I'm going to say yes. Do you think this hybrid opportunity will change the way people work? For example, work part-time for multiple companies? Yes, I think this is opening. And once again, companies don't like this because we tend to think of employees as full-time, as employees as people that we own, and they're part of us, and they have our own, like a jersey with the logo and all that stuff. I think this is definitely a trend that we're going to see in many companies that are going to start taking part-time employees, which happen to be full-time employees. No? So they're part-time for this company, but they are full-time for them. And those people are going to have to switch, and they're going to have to belong to two different teams. And that's okay. It's like if you play two different sports. On Sundays, you're playing, I don't know, cricket, and maybe you're playing football on Saturday, whatever, and you're changing, maybe for different teams. And this is going to happen. This is because when people are going to the same way that in the past decade and the past 5 years, people started working more independently because of Fiverr and Upwork and different platforms that make it easy. I think that those platforms are going to say, hey, we can create the hybrid employee. I'm giving this for free, opportunity, and start finding and recruiting for jobs. And this is going to allow people flexibility. Maybe there are people that have skills that they can play more than one role, and their companies are not giving them the opportunity. So they can, maybe half of my day is a marketer, half of my day is a coach, and I'm going to be fine with that. I see a lot of people that left jobs and wanted to start their careers because they had a passion, but then they failed because they weren't happy at their job full time, yet they like it, but they weren't ready to run their own business. So they become really frustrated, and now they're going back into the corporate world. What if you can work part-time for a corporate and then part-time independently or for other company that gives you the opportunity to do whatever you love? So great question, Cindy. Thank you for bringing this up.
I think there's a final one here from Dan. In one of your LinkedIn responses, you discussed SDT by Daisy and Ryan. Can you say more about their work as it impacts your own work?
I'm trying to look. It's not in the Q&A, right? What is there?
It's in the chat, Gustavo. I'll copy and paste it here.
Yeah. You discuss it. To be honest, I'm kind of lost with that. Self-determination theory. Yeah. Okay. It's one of Maren posts, because I know Maren is a fan of. No? Do you want to say something, Maren? Come on.
I don't really want to answer the question for you, but there was, at some point, there was in passing a comment on self-determination theory, which is indeed by Ryan and DC, and about how there are three interrelated things that, make people thrive and provide internal motivation, and that's, relatedness. What was it? Relatedness, competence, and autonomy. And these are all things, obviously, that are supported by everything that you do in your book. So just always interesting that people have their theories that have existed for a while, but they don't really have the methods to make it happen. And now you've just provided this book to allow people to apply that in their real lives.
Thank you. I was lost with acronyms because sometimes there's so many that I would say. Yeah, and I always use Daniel Pink's example, and he talks about exactly the same. So the point about autonomy, mastery, purpose that drive people, and basically motivation 3.0 with this internal. So people, the carrot and stick model doesn't necessarily move people. We need to connect with what really drives people, and this is part of what's happening with the new reality of work. People don't want to be motivated; they want to do what motivates them, what drives them. Okay. So cool. So I want to make sure that we.
Gustavo, there's another question from Claudia, and she's asking for you to respond that one.
Claudia Coker, great to see you here. Do you plan to create a company workbook? No, I think that the book itself has a lot of activities included. So it's like it's a hybrid book in that sense. So it has a lot of theories, ideas, stories, but also a lot of tools. So I don't think it needs more. But I don't know. I leave it to you if you guys read it and feel there's still more to do, well, we take it from there. But I want to write another book.
All right, we'll see everyone here in 6 months after that one's published.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you guys for joining. It was really, you made my day. It was super, super exciting. I appreciate your time and love and being here. It was awesome. Thank you again, and let's stay in touch. Bye-bye. Thank you.